Could you name any other G20 economy that has only a national debt of 23% of GDP, a 3% fiscal deficit, 3% growth, in its 22nd year of continuous growth, unemployment of less than 6%, a strong currency, and massive mineral resources?
Well, you're benchmarking us, as I do, against countries that are poorly performing. Our benchmark in Australia is to be the best in the world. That's what we were, and that's what we want to be.
But
now,
but my question was, could you name another G20 economy that could bring together all these assets?
No, but they didn't start in the position that we started
in. But that's not my point. My point is that however you define Australia's performance, compared to most of the G20, it's actually doing rather well.
I don't accept the basis of your question, which assumes that it's okay for us to underperform our benchmark. We have to be at our best. We've got to be able to compete.
But I'm talking about the G20.
Well, yeah, I know the G20.
That includes,
I chair it. I'm familiar with it, right?
Then if you chair it, I'll ask her a third time, and I'll maybe get an answer. Could you name me a G20 country that could bring all the, I'll read them out if you want again, all these economic assets together? Could you name me one?
No, and I tell you why. Because they did not start in the same blessed position that we started in 7 years ago.
All right.
Because we have built systems in Australia that simply assume that the golden days will continue. And it would be negligent of me to be saying to the Australian people, it's all right, don't worry, we don't have to undertake any reform. She'll be all right. Well, she won't be all right.
That wasn't my point. But as chairman of the G20, could you tell me another G20, you can take the best or the worst, I don't care which, could you tell me another G20 nation which has an accumulated national debt of only 23% of GDP?
But they didn't start with no national net debt. They didn't start at that position.
Could you tell me one that has?
Well, Norway is a classic example where it has significant surplus assets, right?
No,
They're not in the G20, I know.
But it has a national debt of bigger than 23% of GDP. As you try to move towards that surplus, whose date, at least until the budget, is undetermined, what percentage, or what will the balance be between spending restraint and tax increases?
Well, we want to have, there will be a natural increase in revenue.
That's just by the buoyancy of the economy. That's fiscal drag.
You will have that. And there will be a significant reduction in expenditure. I know what you're getting at. I'm not going to give you the answer. Having said that...
Well, I wouldn't change the habit of a lifetime.
Well, you should... No, I'm normally very straight. If you interview me after the 13th of May, I'm happy to do it. But I can say to you that there has to be a contribution on all sides of the equation, because in some areas, government contributions are not through spending, and therefore there has to be a contribution in taxes. Now, our goal is to reduce our tax rates, but it's not going to be immediate and it's going to be difficult. We're already getting rid of the carbon tax and the mining tax, and we've actually put in place, locked in, the tax cuts that were meant to be the compensation for the carbon tax. So there's already been a round of tax cuts. But the challenge is, and our tax rates are far less than many of the G20, as you know. But the challenge is that we're facing competition in our region where the tax rates are, in many cases, far, far lower than what we have. And they don't have the welfare and social and education safety net that we have. So we've got to get that balance right.
During the lifetime of this government, until the next general election here, do you rule out a rise in GST?
During this term of government, yes.
You sounded a little hesitant there.
Well, I wanted to be sure about your question. We said there will be no change to the GST in this term, and we said that if we were going to change the GST, we would take it to the next election, and we will honour that commitment.
One of the things Mrs Thatcher did, many people thought she was a tax cutter, but what she really did was change the incidence of tax. She moved tax from direct to indirect. She had substantial cuts in income tax, but she doubled VAT, your equivalent to your GST, from 7.5% to 15%. Does that have any appeal to you? I don't mean the doubling, but the moving, the instance of moving away from taxing directly to taxing indirectly.
Well, just between you and me?
Yeah. No one's listening.
Look, clearly there is an imbalance in the Australian taxation system, but again, we have said that we'll take that to the next election. So I think the most important thing is to fix the expenditure side of the budget at the moment. Revenues have to rise, but increase that, get the budget on a sustainable path back to surplus, and then give ourselves some capacity to deliver tax reform. Now, think about real tax reform that I learned, and it's the benefit of having been a minister for 9 years previously, is that there needs to be some compensation for the community associated with the changes in taxation, because it's quite dislocating for the community to have taxation change. Many governments change tax to increase their revenue immediately to solve a budget hole. What we've got to do is have a sustainable change that includes compensating people for that change. Now, we've got to give ourselves some fiscal room to do that. At the moment, we don't have that.
Would it not be politically difficult to go into the next election promising a rise in GST?
Well, probably would.
I mean, Chancellor Osborne told me before the last election that he had no plans to increase VAT. And in his very first budget 2 months later, he increased it from 17.5% to 20%. Isn't that what politicians do?
No, because...
They said they have no plans.
In 1998, we went to the election promising to introduce a 10% GST. And we were following the celebrated example of a failure in Canada. We had the courage to do that. We levelled with the Australian people. And thank God they accepted it. Now, I think you have to have courage in this business. And I think also the most important currency in politics is honesty. And, if you're fair income with it, that's an Australian term, if you're straight with the Australian people, they might not like it, they might not agree with it, but if they know that what you're doing is right, they'll back it.